Did we get any public comment from the website?
Brian, I talked to Debbie Wilmot. We gave it a week and we received no public comment.
Okay, excellent. Then I think let's go ahead and move into the bond program status report.
So we're going to have Mr. John Irwin give this report too. Can everybody see that there?
Looks good on my screen.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Aaron, for pulling up the report. So yeah, this is the December 2020 report. It was our last report of the 2020 year. As you can see on our graphs there, we had a uptick in our program reserve plus contingencies. And that was all from increases in project contingencies, because our purple and red lines there for the program reserve and the program reserve estimated complete, we had no change this month. I did go back and look just for the committee, because I know the last report we presented to you all was in September, and we did have upticks in program reserve totaling $74,000 between our October and November reports, and that was due to additional ETO reimbursements in the program. So those aren't new this month, that won't be reflected, but those were in the past 2 months of reports. So from the budget perspective, we have several projects in closeout, as you all know, and this first bullet is just kind of a reiteration of what we all discussed in October with our plan to transfer contingencies and allocate contingencies in existing projects that are closing out. And then we have a follow-up for you all with that later on tonight. And then the second bullet, which is a really good one for the program, Mountainside's contingency increased by $360,000. We had our final reconciliation with Hoffman and officially financially closed out that contract. So that returned quite a bit of savings back to the project, and we put that in the contingency there. And then one of our repair projects, the 2021 roof replacement, that budget increased by $555,000, and that was due to bid results that we received in the month.
Does that mean that our estimate was off? Our
Yeah.
budget?
Yeah.
Do we know why it was off? Was there a difference in quantities, or are bidders reluctant to bid with us, or what was the?
Yeah, good question. You know, we couldn't really figure it out. We actually got really good bid coverage on those. It's like 7 different roofs that are involved in that project, and we had, I think it was like 5 bidders for each of them. So really good coverage, and it just seems to represent sort of an escalation. The quantities and everything were all good. There's no scope creep or anything like that, and really just seems to be the cost of work.
So all of your bidders were up in the same range?
Yeah, yep, exactly. Yeah, we did a multiple award situation, so you could be awarded multiple, like it wasn't all to one person, it was whoever's the lowest on each specific of the 7 roofs. And so we awarded it was 2 or 3 different roofing contractors, each got a piece of the pie. But it was really good bid results and bid coverage, just over budget.
What was the total that we're talking about? I'm trying to gauge how much $500,000 is. That 10% or 1%?
I can look here real quick, I think.
It just seems like a large amount. That's why I asked.
Oops.
Aaron, did you hear from any of the bidders that the cost included extra safety protocols due to the COVID environment?
No, I haven't heard that at all. And in fact, we didn't really even see that across many of our projects that were. Just the total budget here, Dick, is It was a little over 4 million, so it was about 15-20%.
So that's quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Aaron, I have one other question on Mountainside. Almost a year back, we had some issue with the false ceiling or something there. Isn't that right? Has that been comprehended? Final closeout? There were tiles falling or something about, if I remember correctly.
That doesn't sound exactly right. We do have a couple issues at Mountainside. So one of them we talked about was these field humps that we have out here, where the storm water wasn't draining, and then they put in the bentonite, and that's expanded. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But there were no ceiling tiles.
Ceiling or roof? Okay, maybe. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe I misremembered. Okay, thanks.
All right, I'll keep moving along. For the schedule perspective, so ACMA is still moving along really, really well. We're finishing up interior work, and that's everything from installing dance floors to the security system. And then our project team actually started this month having conversations to discuss the temporary occupancy requirements for the project. So that one continues to just do really great schedule wise and is all coming together really well. And we're enjoying seeing it all come together. And then we alluded this in the budget perspective, but the 2021 roof replacement project was bid, and that was our first kind of big project that was bid out for the summer 2021 construction schedule. And then that scope, I think Aaron said 7. The report here says 5 elementary schools. One of us is right. Or maybe it's 6, and we'll split the middle. And we split that award between 2 different contractors. And also out to bid right now is the Cooper Mountain seismic project, and the solicitation will close in February. And that'll be the last voter commitment seismic scope that's in this bond, which is exciting. The maintenance facility project is starting to get back going again. We talked about this a couple meetings ago. It was currently on hold, but we completed a revised service letter with Clean Water Services, and we're hoping phase 3 of construction can begin in April of this year. And that's all pending the permit approval. And our last scheduled bullet here, Bethany Roof and HVAC, which is a project that we're doing this summer. We have an opportunity there to pursue another seismic rehabilitation grant, and that could award the project $2.5 million in seismic grant funds. If you all remember, we've been successfully awarded these on the Aloha High School and the Beaver Acres and the Cooper Mountain seismic projects. So this would be really great for us to do some extra seismic scope at the school. And so in anticipation of the possible award of the grant, we're kind of doing some redesign because we were just designing the roof and HVAC. And so now we're changing the design a little bit to include the seismic scope in case the application is accepted. And then if the application is accepted because of schedule, we would split that work over the next 2 summers instead of being able to do it all this summer. And those are, nothing really changed with our challenges and opportunities this month. So that's the executive summary. And then, yeah, thank you, Aaron. We do have a new activity map for the 2021 construction schedule. So these are all the schools and projects we'll be touching this year or this summer.
One comment back on the that roof, 15% or whatever it is. I'd recommend that you guys go back and do a detailed reconciliation to find out if it is quantities or price. Where did we miss? Just so that it might have some bearing on the future and our future budgeting.
Yeah, so we did do that, Dick, and I don't have that handy right now. I should have brought that, but we did do that, and really it was what I said. It was kind of a market condition thing. We went back and compared because we could look at the estimate at each of the schools with the bid results at each school, and the discrepancy really was limited to two of the projects, two of the larger projects. And we talked with the cost estimators and the contract and really couldn't come up with any other explanation other than that. I mean, all of the quantities and everything were the same in the estimate. It really just seemed to be market factors, which is not a great answer, but that was kind of the best thing that we could track down there. But yeah, I appreciate the feedback, and I definitely agree. Okay, so let's see. Here's this. I don't think we had too much for updates on the rest of the slides here, right, John?
Nope. That was pretty much all the new information.
So I think that does it for this report. So we have another presentation to give tonight, sort of recognizing that our monthly report that we do doesn't give a good look ahead necessarily. So we've put together a quick presentation just on kind of the macro level of the overall bond and where we think we're at and some of the remaining risks as we see it for the program.
Aaron, this is Brad. I had a question. Just kind of, looking at the central maintenance facility. Just the one question. I know we're working through the kinks on that, but with the budget kind of exceeding the schedule that's being done, what's the risk right now for the remaining work that we have? I mean, is the majority of this already bought out, or is there much left to actually be done? I know we're not linking up schedule wise, but it's the previous slide there.
Are you talking about the district-wide repairs project or the maintenance facility?
The central maintenance facility. It's the previous slide. Previous. Go back up to deck. There we go. That one.
Okay, you know what? I'm gonna kick the can on that one. I'll deep dive here on our next presentation. I've identified that as a risk here, and we can talk about it.
Okay.
Let me share that one. So, relatively quick slideshow, but lots of content here, and happy to ask any questions. Feel free to jump in with questions as they come up. So, just a quick overview. I feel pretty confident in saying that the bond program as a whole is well on track to finish everything that was committed, plus some bonus. Really super good news stories.
And that, excuse me, Aaron, that does include the set aside for Raleigh Hills School?
Yes, yep. Yep, it's still set aside. So yep, even accounting for that, we're in good shape, and it's neat to be able to start saying that to community members. I did a couple of outreach meetings yesterday around our long range facilities plan, and it's to tell people, hey, we're finishing under budget. We're delivering extra projects that the school board's approved, and really good news story there. So we are currently projecting a cost savings at completion. So of course that money can be reallocated to other projects, and I'll show you what we're talking about at the end of this presentation. Also rolled into this report is sort of the wrap up of what we talked about at our last BAC meeting, which was allocating some of that program reserve and contingency transfers. Some of the projects that are done, what are we doing with that money, and how does that affect the overall financial picture of the program? And then we'll look also at some of the outstanding projects we have and done a bit of a risk assessment for us to take a look at and talk about, sort of getting to Brad's question about the maintenance facility. That one's definitely on there. So as of right now, we have completed $700 million worth of work in the bond program, which, as you recall, was originally a $680 million program. Currently sitting at 807. So pretty amazing to think about how much is done. For 133 distinct projects, and several of those, probably a dozen at least, were involved multiple locations. Some of them were even district-wide projects. So if you extrapolated that, we did a lot of projects. And there's a full list on our website there too. All right, so I'm sorry, there's a lot going on this page, and we don't need to read everything here, but these are projects in process, and these are projects that we've identified being low risk. So we don't feel that any of these represent any sort of risk to the bond program. They're in good shape. Many of them are almost complete, or in some cases, they're being managed to budget, so there's not really a risk of overrunning. Big one on here, of course, is ACMA. ACMA's in really good shape. Already returned 1.8 million to program reserve, and forecasting that we'll be returning at least another million to program reserve. So that's not even, it's too early to say that for sure, but that's not being shown on our summary for tonight, but I feel pretty confident that we will complete that project very strongly. Other ones of note on here, Raleigh Hills, you asked about that one, Dick. So at Raleigh Hills, we still have the $12 million set aside, and one recommendation I would like to make is that we actually proceed with doing the design for a replacement school there. It's something that, as we've gone through the conditions assessment and some of the early bond planning efforts, Raleigh Hills really jumps out as being a high need replacement school, and it really would make a lot of sense for a lot of reasons to actually just go ahead and get started on the design of that school. So that would come out of the current $12 million set aside.
Something I'd like to jump on that, Aaron, really quick, and it's definitely a consideration to use the current 12 million for design. It would be something that we would go to the school board before we would move forward with that and ask for their approval. We're going to talk about bond planning here and what we're looking at for the next bond, and having the opportunity that we have the 12 million available now. As you know, we would want to get a head start on design. We'd want to get that rolling, especially looking at a new bond. Raleigh Hill would be a replacement school in that bond. So any opportunity to move that forward in the planning and design would be helpful. I think having this initial conversation and thinking with the bond accountability committee helps that. It helps us. And then again, when we present it to the school board and talk about why and get approval for that kind of be looking at next steps for it.
I think it's a good idea, just from the standpoint of credibility with the parents and other stakeholders with that school. It would show that the interest or intent. However, recalling the discussion that we had when we made that recommendation to the board, it seems like it would be prudent to begin with conceptual design, but as I remember, somebody pointed out that we would not want to go into detailed design because unless we have a firm start date, just because of the potential changes that could happen in that time.
Yeah, it's something we've talked about, and we would definitely consider. I mean, it takes a long time these days to design a school that's that large, and I think by the time we got to that point anyways, we would naturally have some clarity around the future bond program and timing of some of those projects. So definitely a lot of different considerations there.
And another,
I was
go
gonna
ahead, Dick.
say, I'm all in favor of the conceptual design because I know that is a collaborative thing and would take some time.
And thank you for saying that, Dick. Another consideration that we have to look at, I think you heard me talk about it before, the group has mentioned it before, a long-range facility plan is due. We have to have a plan every 10 years. And when you look at the capacity across the district, student capacity, and where we have overcapacity and we're under capacity, that has to get factored into as well, into our decisions. So when we're looking at how do you address capacity, you could do it by adding capacity, or you can do it by a boundary adjustment, which requires a lot of discussions and consideration. So those are things that we plan to tackle in the long range facility plan, as far as options on how you tackle, address capacity. But the conceptual piece, Dick, I again appreciate that feedback and your thoughts about that.
Awesome, thank you. A couple other ones I'll point out on here. The fire line separation project. This is actually sort of a maintenance project, but it's called out as its own project in the bond, not a maintenance project. What this means is in some buildings, we have areas where some of the fire sprinklers are fed off of the domestic water system, as opposed to being fed from their own water supply, which usually you like to have them separated in order to keep water pressure up in case there's a fire. And what we found is when we investigated this project some more is that it really is no longer necessary. Most of the places where this occurs it's like one sprinkler head or two sprinkler heads in an entire school. And it really doesn't make sense to add a whole new water line to the school to accommodate that. And it's not a high risk. And so just coordinating that with the fire marshal in the city, it became apparent that that's not necessary to do. However, we are going to recommend that we repurpose those funds in that project in order to replace fire alarm panels in the district. That it actually is a pretty big risk right now. Many of the fire alarm panels are very, very old and outdated. They're no longer supported by the manufacturer, and we would be well served to replace those old panels and get something more adequate to the way that we need them to be and in accordance with how we monitor the fire alarm panels these days. Then the last one on this page I'll hit is the seismic upgrades. So John mentioned that Cooper Mountain is out to bid right now. That's kind of the last remaining voter commitment seismic upgrade project. Those have done pretty well financially here on the last couple, and fingers crossed that we get good bid results on Cooper Mountain. But right now we're projecting it's in pretty good shape financially and that there's some savings there. And so we're going to plan on using that those funds to continue to execute seismic projects. And it actually is very helpful because it helps us pursue grant opportunities from the state. So for many projects, we need to have matching funds in order to be eligible for the state funds. And having some money there gives us that flexibility to be able to pursue those grants, which is awesome. Okay, any questions on this page? I know there's a lot there.
Yeah. Hey, Aaron, this is Tom Quillen. Just a thought for you as I'm thinking about this page compared to the summary at the beginning. And I was just thinking about how there's probably an opportunity to reconcile some of the way that we correctly talk about having achieved the full scope of the bond measure and funded most of the projects with the fact that the decision was made the way it was on Raleigh Hills. And so it's, it might just be sort of a simple
adjustment to the way we present that top slide around saying, I think it's probably more accurate to say we addressed all of the issues rather than completed all of the originally intended
Okay.
projects.
Yeah, if I understand what you're asking for, Tom, I really agree, because I was just sitting here as a devil's advocate looking at this and thinking, gosh, those guys asked for too much money 6 years ago. Obviously, they bloated their thing, and we know that's not true because we've lived through it. But I think the way you frame it and reconcile it, you can answer that question when the next bond request comes up, which will probably be sooner than later.
Yes. Okay, that's great feedback. Thank you. Okay, this slide, this is where we got the risk areas. So the first one, the high risk that we've talked about is the district-wide facility repairs, and we've listed this as high risk. This would incorporate the roof projects, just because there's still a lot of projects yet to do, and some degree of budget uncertainty with those projects. This is also where we've been going for a long time that we're going to need a budget increase to the project. You recall we proposed a $25 million budget increase to the 98 million project, and ended up being recommended that half of it be done last year and then the other half be done this year. So really saying it's high risk just represents that it still needs that other half of that plus up to the budget there. And then let's see, the maintenance facility. So this is the one Brad asked about. Right now, there is, so let's see. So we haven't done, this gets complicated to explain, but right now there's phase 3 of the project, which is sort of the phase up along the road there that hasn't started yet. It is bid out and everything. It's under commitment with Skanska. It's still in the contract. We've just had to extend the contract. So that scope of work hasn't really changed very much at this point. And I'm sure they're going to ask for some escalation to that, which will be fair since we've paused them for a while. The added scope to the project will be this new drainage swale that we're talking about on the THPRD property. There will be some cost to that, although I don't expect it to be significant. It's really just it's a swale, so it's some grading and adding some plants and rocks, and it's not massive, so there shouldn't be a huge price tag associated with that. We do currently have about $1 million of uncommitted funds in the project still, so it's a relatively healthy contingency still within the project. And the plan is to use that to improve the maintenance facility itself. It doesn't have really a good conference space. They have really inadequate restrooms and access within the building. So whatever contingency is remaining within that project should be used for that. So I don't think it's a significant risk, but it's definitely, the greater risk, quite honestly, is that we would fail to obtain this drainage easement from THPRD. And that's kind of up to them and being a good neighbor and being a good partner to us. But if that doesn't end up working out for whatever reason, it will require us to go in and install stormwater detention on our property, and that does have a hefty price tag, and that would be a significant risk.
Did you mention that Skanska potentially has a claim for extended schedule?
Yeah, I expect that they probably will. I mean, certainly for schedule. So yeah, we've put them on hold for about a year as we work to figure out the permitting around the stormwater. So they get the schedule extension. We had them pull off the job, so they haven't been spending money this whole time, but I expect that there'll be claims for escalation and just the pause. So that's something we'll have to negotiate as soon as we're ready to re-engage.
I guess as we're looking at these, the ones that have some risk, do you have a sense of the kind of the range of costs that the exposure is, and just for the committee to just kind of understand, how in aggregate we're looking, if there's potential risk exposure of $1 million, or is it $10 million across these projects that are right here?
Good question. And in fact, I was ready for that question because I think you asked it last time. So my recommendation slide here in a couple slides, I am suggesting that out of the remaining program reserve, we set aside about $2 million really as a program level contingency for all of these projects. I think that would be suitable. Really the greatest cost risk out of all of these projects right now is probably these last two, which didn't put much detail on, but it's the classroom wall and doors and the security cameras project. You'll recall these were added projects that we proposed using program reserve for. And not a ton of scope definition around it when we proposed the budgets for those. It's kind of a high level estimate. I believe it was $3 million and then $2 million respectively. So right now we're going through and doing the detail work on all of those. I think the camera project actually is going to be in pretty good shape. We did just get bids in on that one and it looks pretty good, but the classroom wall and door is pretty complicated. That's kind of one where we could spend a lot of money and go through and do improvements at a lot of schools. And so it's really just a matter of where do we draw the line of what is our standard there. So those are kind of the two that I see with the biggest cost risk out of these, other than the warranty repairs. So on this slide, I did a bit of a risk assessment here, and you can see I go into a bit more detail on those projects and then kind of what we're doing to mitigate those risks, and then some of the listed as a consequence, but also sort of a recommendation, talking about how much I feel like we should set aside to cover each of those. So. Oh, the other one here I didn't really address, this post-warranty. So the post-warranty, I think we talked about it last time, but this is sort of the idea of these projects where we've completed, where we have an issue that may come up after warranty, after construction. And we've seen this a few times. The big example being at Onside High School with these field humps out here and just needing to go in and fix it. And really, this is kind of after we've exhausted really any recourse that we have contractually or legally with contractors or design teams. So it's kind of when we're left having to deal with a situation, I feel it's prudent to have a bit of a set aside in order to be able to deal with those. Okay, so summary of our project contingency fund. So this was a follow-up to our last meeting, the October 28th. You can see what we had listed as the contingencies in each of these projects, and then what those contingencies are today. So pretty similar, went up in a few cases, down in a few cases, but overall it went up, which is pretty good. So this is it's the summary of the contingencies within the projects that are largely, or that they are complete, actually. So this is how we are planning on allocating those contingencies. Mentioned already with the seismic projects, we're planning on leaving that $4.5 million in the seismic projects and use that to be able to pursue grant opportunities. We just submitted for grants at Bethany Elementary School and McKinley Elementary School. Bethany required some matching funds in order to make it work. McKinley actually was really neat in that it did not require any matching funds. So that I think the application was for 2.3 million for state funds, and if that gets approved, the state's paying for that whole project. So that's really wonderful. And then we're discussing how to use that strategically across the rest of the what we know is a vast need for seismic improvements in the district. The next one here, William Walker. So William Walker is done, of course, and sitting on about $1.6 million in contingency. So that's all going to go into the program reserve. And then kind of that, we're saying that we're going to put 500,000 into that post-warranty repair fund that we talked about. For Mountainside, great news that we're able to wrap things up with Hoffman. I went on a little bit longer than we like, but it was mostly sorting out a few different warranty issues, but this was cost savings at the end of that closeout. We did a pretty thorough financial audit on them with our auditing firm, and that was a really good process. And this resulted in savings here. So we're going to keep that right there right now as we work on figuring out the cost of dealing with the field humps out here. And then the last item was the contingency that were sitting in Sato and Hazeldale. Those both had a couple little issues, permitting issues that we were working on wrapping up, but they are all done now, all signed off, and able to transfer that back into the program reserve. So here are just some recommendations and informational items we wanted to talk about. The recommendations are items that we will need school board approval in order to do based on the cost management and control plan. So we're going to be bringing these to the next school board business meeting as discussion items, and wanted to talk about them here first. So the first one was the budget adjustment for the building condition assessment. So that's the district-wide repair project, and that's the other half of that $25 million that we talked about. We're recommending that we increase that budget in order to be able to finish those projects. And our second recommendation here, we talked about a little bit already, but what is to proceed with the design at Rod Hills. And then the rest are kind of informational items. So we talked about all these already, but keeping the $4.5 million in the seismic project, leaving the money in Mountainside in order to deal with the field issue, transferring a bunch of money into the program reserve, transferring that money into the post-warranty repair fund, reallocating what we're doing with the domestic fire line separation project, repurposing it towards the fire line panels. Actually, talk about this next item. I meant to delete this, but talking about a process to cancel and defer repair projects. That would be a good topic for another night, I think, but we have similar to the fire line thing, there's some projects that were conceived of years ago that as we've gone in, we've just found that they're no longer applicable, or they've been done at some point, or they really just don't make sense for a variety of reasons. So we've been working on a process to deal with those and how we record it. Talk about that. And then the last one is recommend kind of keeping that set aside of $2.5 million at least for the ongoing projects that we have. And
Aaron, can we just go back to that last slide really quick?
Yeah.
I do want to bring up one project that we're looking at for the cancellation and make you aware. We probably talked about this before, but when we look at the next bond and timing, there is a roof replacement at Beaverton High School. And you look at the age of that facility, and you look at it where it is in the plan. So we have to manage that piece of it. do we replace the roof under the current bond, which it's scheduled, to do, or do we wait and look at a complete new replacement building in the next bond? So that's a big one. And Aaron, what's the line item for that in the?
I believe it's about 4 million right now.
Yep, 4 million.
It's a big price tag that we have to look at, and I think Aaron's right. I think we need to have another more in-depth conversation about the projects that we're looking to cancel or defer based on what are the reasons behind it, and we can present that to you at a future date.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to talk about. I enjoy it, and what it really speaks to is trying to get ahead of the curve a little bit and be a bit more forward thinking in terms of life cycle planning for the buildings. Like, we really need to be more thoughtful about the timing of when we make investments with respect to the overall building life. And I think we're getting there. We're getting close, and having all the information that we do from the conditions assessment and all these other things going on is really helpful in getting to that point. And then this actually was kind of the meat of the thing here. So this shows what all those different things look like when you put them together, all the different transfers and everything. And I'll run down the list here real quick. So right now our program reserve is at 19.7 million. We're recommending transferring a little over 14 million into the BCA projects. That's the remainder of those repair projects we talked about. That's the second half of what we've been showing for a while. And in fact, on the previous financial report, that's already included in those graphs that you've seen. Showing the adjustment to the William Walker contingency being drawn down, and then the other contingencies showing the transfer into the repair, post-warranty repair fund. After all those things, we're sitting on $7 million of program reserve. And then we've shown a couple more little holds here for items that we know that we've talked about. So needing to consider adding the additional classrooms at VOS. Heard that that's a big need and priority, so put that on there. And then also the contingency hold of the $2 million for ongoing projects that we've talked about. So that kind of leaves us with a little over $2.5 million that we're in good shape, and that's kind of just a summary of where we're sitting right now.
Aaron, this comprehends the increase in the roof replacement cost, right, of approximately 500K.
Yeah, that's included in here. So that's within the 98 million. That's within the district-wide repair project. And because of how those projects are managed, it didn't end up increasing the overall bottom line of the bond, because we're really, other than the increase we're showing here, we're really working to manage those projects within that budget.
Aaron, I may have missed it. What's driving the classroom addition at VOS?
Great question. So it's a couple things. The big thing, though, really is the expansion of the pre-K programs there.
Okay. Have you looked at that? I mean, that's relatively new facility. Is there an easy add-on?
There is, yeah, and to some degree, it was kind of planned. The facility was planned with the ability to add, 4 or so classrooms, and so the core facilities of the building, the cafeteria, the bathrooms, and everything, the infrastructure is really sized to allow for that. So we have a pretty good scenario for where we could add the classrooms with as little disruption as possible, hopefully.
Is that just a VOS specific, or is there a potential for adding at Hazeldale and the other facilities that we've just built?
Yeah, great question. So right now it's a need at VOS. We'll actually look at it when we talk about bond planning and the long range facility plan next, but it does seem like it will probably also be a need at Sato in the future. So the way we've looked at it is similar to how we did with the prototypes, to where, you know, the design for the addition at both should also apply for Sato. Some efficiencies in doing that, but yeah, we're probably going to include that addition of Sato at least in the plan for the next bond.
Thank you.
Dick, if it would be helpful, I can bring back up the situation sheet that we shared. I know it's been a while that we talked about it, but we go into why VOS specifically had a need for additional classrooms. It wasn't based on student capacity increasing or student enrollment. It was more on the poverty at the school, Student Success Act funds coming in, and the need for you get more teachers, so it reduces classrooms size. So we had to expand that piece of it. But I can push some things to you that gives some more background about that.
Sure. Thank you.
One quick thought for you. Thank you, Aaron, for walking us through this program summary. I think the school district should be really proud at how well you've done with the MWESB goals for the overall bond program. And I would suggest you not waste an opportunity to showcase that and include it in this document.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, that's a great point, Cheryl. Those are really impressive numbers.
Let's see here. Okay, so this is the last slide other than the question slide. Just kind of what we're doing now, planning for the future. So we have our conditions assessment that we did last year, and definitely want to keep that going and keep it live. So we're already updating the thing based on projects that were completed this last summer. So we've been working with them to go through and update the database with all the new assets that were added or replaced or anything like that. And that's really going to be driving the conditions, facility conditions need as we look for to the bond planning. Talked a lot about seismic projects already. That's a big need, and I'm pretty proud of the planning that we're doing around that and trying to be as efficient as possible and really capitalize on getting the grants from the state as much as possible too. And then the long range facility plan. So that is going to be our next presentation. So I won't spend too much time on that right now, but spending a lot of time working on planning for an upcoming bond. And that's it. Any questions?
Thank you. That was good, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this was great.
So I will, and maybe we can, I guess I should have put this on the agenda, but in terms of our recommendations here, we had two, which were increasing the budget for the repair projects and then proceeding with the design at Raleigh Hills. I think it'd be great if this group could discuss those and maybe vote on those. Go to present those to the school board to make a decision.
What was the amounts, Aaron, that you're thinking about for that? It'd be good to know.
For transferring to BCA, it was a little over 14 million. The Raleigh Hills design, our current, we're sitting on 12 million right now there, and a full design of the project would probably be about 3 million, I think. And you know, we don't have conceptual level design would be quite a bit less. Although I would like to go a little bit further than conceptual. The site is interesting and it's very complicated sitting on Shoals Ferry like it does. And the more planning we can do around the traffic aspect of it as soon as possible would be really helpful, not just to us, but to the county and I'm sure to the city as well.
Hey, Aaron, this is Eric. Do you have that matrix of competing projects in your scoring? So, I mean, imagine these two elevated to the top of the scoring mechanisms we had. Maybe we can refresh that and look at it together again.
Yeah, so those two aren't included in that. And the reason why the district-wide repair, we've been showing that as a need all along. And that was kind of above the line almost, in that it's necessary to fulfill the commitments on finishing those projects. And then Raleigh Hills, we have the current the project that we put on hold, and so the money to do the design at Raleigh Hills would come from that project. So it's not coming from program reserve at all. So we didn't weigh it against those other projects.
Okay.
So, Aaron, for the Raleigh Hills initial design, are we going to use the same model that where we used a prototype reference design and then go off that, or are you going to start from scratch?
Good question. We would start from scratch, and a few reasons for that, but the main one being we really heard super loud and clear from the community that they weren't interested in that. They really, it's a neat old school, lots of character, and they really want a school there that represents the character of the community and the current school. And so we look to start the design over.
Thank you.
So maybe, Aaron, what we should do is start with the district-wide repair. And then that's the $14 million number.
Yes. Yep.
So I think let's talk about that first. I think one thing for the newer members of the committee, and this is something the district staff has brought up for several years, and we held off making this recommendation to the board until we felt confident that there were sufficient funds to complete the other projects. So, I mean, it looked like a couple of years ago there were going to be sufficient reserves in order to do this, but we wanted to be absolutely positive. So I think, from my perspective, this is the right time to make that decision. But if anybody has any questions or other thoughts, let's talk about them before we vote.
Is BCA, is it the building condition assessment, or is it actually the projects that are coming out of the building condition assessment?
Good question. We've called it a bunch of different names. And so that's my bad for writing that. But yeah, it's the district-wide repair project. It's the 98 million projects. It's just the body of repair, deferred maintenance.
It's the backlog of maintenance and repair.
Yeah.
Any questions or discussion?
Brian, I just want to bring up so in the May, just for background and kind of how we've shared this information, in the May 2020 school board meeting, we put together we call it a situation sheet, just a 2-page, 3-page document that talked about how we plan to move forward with the BCA project and what we needed to do to get to where we're at today. And in that May memo, and I believe it was shared with the BAC. I know it was shared with kind of some background for the new members, but in there's a paragraph where we talked about we're going to come back to the school board and request the remaining balance of 13.8 is what we had at that time in May, and so now we're at 14 million to execute the remaining projects by the summer of 2022. And so just in terms of communication, and like Brian said, this has been talked about for time now, but that was put out in a sit sheet back at that time, and I'm happy to share that too again. But it has been documented for where we're at today.
So if there are not any other questions or discussion, would someone like to make a motion?
I move that we accept the recommendations as presented.
I'll second that.
Excellent. It's been moved and seconded to accept the recommendation on the district-wide repair project. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That recommendation is supported by the BAC. So let's move to the second question, which is allocating funds from the reserve for the Raleigh Hills project in order to move forward with design. Are there any additional questions or discussion on that topic?
I guess
So just to clarify, it's not from the reserve, it's from the Raleigh Hills project, but I mean, it's the set aside.
Right, the set aside for the project.
Yeah.
So I have a quick question. Erin, is the financial ask to complete full design of the new school or just conceptual design? You were talking about both options earlier.
You know, I would look to Josh that one. It would be my inclination to do the full design, although I'm totally fine with doing it in phases. It's actually, it would make sense to do it in phases not doing the full thing. The main reason being that we're kind of getting ready to do this bond planning, and having a little bit more granularity on the bond plan would be helpful. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing here. They both help each other. Having furthered the design of Raleigh Hills helps us in bond planning because it helps give us more financial, like cost certainty on the project. And it gives us a better idea of what we're doing there.
So I would say, for the record, we're going to propose the conceptual design and do it in phases. So that would be the ask tonight. And if we decide to take it any further in the future, we would come back to you for a recommendation, the BAC, and get your thoughts and feedback before we present it to the board. And I think, for the record, we can go back and update the presentation to say it's a conceptual piece, but verbally now we're going to say we're recording the video. We'll say it's a conceptual design that we're asking for.
Okay.
I think this makes a lot of sense, and I support it 100%.
Yeah, I agree. I support it, and I think it's very rational to do a phased approach. I was just sitting back thinking about, how do you engage with the community? I think how you design your community engagement to fold into the design process is really going to be key. This is a community that cares a lot about their school and will take a lot of staff and consultant energy to get to a really successful place.
Yeah.
I think it is a really positive thing to be showing them you are committed. The school district is committed to giving them the school that they want and deserve.
I agree with that.
Any other thoughts or questions? Would someone like to make a motion?
I will move that we go forward with the conceptual design for the Raleigh Hills School.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Excellent. Both recommendations are forwarded to the school board.
Thank you all.
Could I ask a question to the committee and the team? Just in looking at this, you know, I know as we move forward, and maybe this is just a factor of me being newer, right? But just there's a lot of, you know, competing needs that you're juggling, and trying to communicate those can be really challenging, and I recognize that. I'm wondering if we're at the beginning of these meetings, maybe if the committee has ever considered to have, you know, what the bond program goals are, you know, right? Like meeting facility needs, enrollment objectives, and educational program needs, and then what the long-term asset management objectives might be that you're kind of looking at downstream. I mean, that then becomes like a bit of a backdrop for a lot of the questions and kind of trade-off discussions that we're having. It's just something to always be able to refer back to kind of test this kind of in accordance with what's laid out in the charter.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea.
Has that ever been discussed among the advisory committee and staff?
We've had, I mean, I think every couple of years we have reviewed the charter, which includes the charge from the school board on what we're to look at. I think maybe that's the kind of important next step is at one of our upcoming meetings, kind of another review of the charter to make sure everyone understands and it still fits. Or we all have a clear understanding of what we're here to do.
Brad, thank you for that input. I think that is important. And my time on board, when I looked at the charter, I looked at the goals, bond goals, it really came to light for me when we were talking about using program reserve for additional projects and in what view we look at that. And admittedly, we were struggling with that, and we kind of it was making that process more complicated than it needed to be. And we got some recommendations from the BAC to kind of simplify that, and that's what we came up with the list that was referred to earlier. But I think in doing what we're talking about now, you bring up a great point, and we just taking Brian's recommendation, we can kind of go through that, look at those goals, and talk through that before we make some presentations like this. So thank you for making that recommendation.
I think if you look at the history of this committee too, which by this point it's been quite a while, that there have been discussions about how to prioritize, in the event that there was extra money to spend, and the tough thing is that there's really never enough. But I think it also there's probably some thought work that's kicking around that talked about how to prioritize. And in this particular case, particularly with Raleigh Hills, we know it's something we've committed to doing, so it makes the decision much easier. It's really a timing rather than an if. And for so many other things to do with the bond planning, we'll be bumping up against an if question rather than trying to imagine when it will necessarily happen. So I'm glad to know that you're going to be talking about it more.
I think one of the things I feel proud of in my time on the BAC is the fact that we haven't gotten kind of dragged off into a lot of theoretical questions about other things we could do. We've really stayed focused on the most important mission, which is delivering on the commitments that the district made to the voters. That's always been the top priority. And I think the district and the board have done a really good job of keeping that as the primary focus. And so that has made it easier because, partially because there's so much need out there, but no one's lost sight of the primary objective.
Okay, awesome. Good discussion. Thank you. So let's see. If everybody's ready, I'll jump over to our last topic, which was I called it the FCA update and bond planning update. It's mostly a bond planning update here. So let me find it. Okay, cool. So we have a consultant on board who is working with us to do a long range facilities plan. You know, just kind of as a reminder, these long range facility plans are required by the state of Oregon every 10 years to be done. And our last one was in 2010. So it's the right time to be doing another one. And it's a very heavily engaged process, meaning we're doing a lot of outreach. So this presentation I'm going to show tonight, it's a little bit higher level. I kind of expect that this group will maybe want to dive into some of the details here, which we can totally do. But this is a presentation we're giving at all sorts of neighborhood meetings, the different CPO meetings. We're giving it at the PTO meetings at every single school. I did 2 of them last night. I think Josh did one, and Steve Sparks is doing most of them. So we're trying to get out there with this and get this message to the community, and with the goal of really getting good feedback from everybody about what are the priorities. This is meant to kind of demonstrate the need a little bit, and then we really want to get that good feedback, like I said. So identifying need, the educational program. There's kind of 3 components to the long range facility plan. The first component here is educational program. So when we're evaluating this, when we're evaluating the different projects, different schools, we really try to use the district's equity lens as we look at this. And part of that is looking at what schools are higher need schools. And this graphic kind of shows some of the higher need schools, as you can see here. And it also plots where the recent schools that we've done kind of land on this chart.
So Aaron, I'm sorry, just to show, I know it's hard on the screen probably, but for the axis, the x-axis is percentage of students of color, and then on the y, it's percentage of students qualifying for free and reduced lunch. So you can see, if you look at that upper right quadrant of that, that's why it's kind of grayed out a little bit more. I like this slide from looking at it, where did our new construction projects come and how do they fit? They're highlighted in green here on the grid. Thank you.
Yep. And then this shows same information, but it plots it out geographically. So we can see where the different projects are taking place, and trying to make sure they're distributed across the district. This shows what we're calling educational adequacy. So this means really square footage per student at each facility. So you can see where a school is either additional capacity or really it's undersized for the students. So you can see in McKinley, it's an average of 82 square feet per student, which really is below our target there of 122. Facility condition. This is one of the other 2 kind of prongs of the long range facility plan. This we've talked a lot about in this group, but this is really driven by the work that McKinstry did in the facilities condition assessment last year that we're currently updating. Whoops. So you can see here just the numbers of facilities that make up the Beaver School District, and pretty amazing that you consider that over 5.7 million square feet of facility space. That's the area that we're responsible for maintaining and keeping up and running. So it's pretty staggering when you look at it. This slide shows our facility age across the district. I think this is a pretty fun slide. So it really jumps out at you. Some of the older schools, we say that the average life cycle of a facility should be about 75 years. That's kind of the standard of the industry. So really, when you're getting past 75 years, you're getting to the point where it doesn't make the most sense to continue to upgrade, and renovate the facility. It's really kind of the bones of the structure are very old and really you need to start thinking about a replacement. So you can see kind of Beaverton High School jumps off the chart there at us, and also Raleigh Hills is on the list there too, along with a few others. I actually am, I'll give you an aside here, but I'm a little bit concerned about where we're going to be sitting in the district, in another 30 years. If you add 30 years to all these facilities, we're going to have a significant amount of facilities that are very old. And I think that's really, that's why it's important that we stay on top of these investments and keep them going, because it only gets harder as time goes on. Things only cost more in the future. And the more we can upgrade a facility like Beaverton now, we don't have to do it in the future. This shows the facility condition index. So this number is calculated in the facility condition assessment. It's basically taking the amount of work required in the school, the amount of repair work that needs to take place, divided by the replacement cost of the school, gives you this index. And you can see there, kind of a standard of the industry is when you start getting up above 0.3 is when you really need to be talking about replacing that facility. So again, some of the same usual suspects on there. I'll point out, you can see some of the facilities have asterisks on them, which represents those numbers should go down. We have gone, like Whitford, for instance, this last summer we did a major HVAC and roofing project at Whitford. And it was like $4 million worth of work. So when we consider that, when we update the facility condition assessment, that number will drop. That FCI number will drop. Whitford will go down below the line. It's just a matter of getting the data updated.
Hey, Aaron, and this correlates to the age of the building, right? There should be a perfect, almost perfect correlation.
It is. It does pretty closely. Yep. I mean, it's not. It does correlate. Yes. It's not used to calculate this, but yes, they do. Seismic condition. So I talk about this one a lot, of course. But this shows that red band there. Actually, I'm going to tell them to make it green band because that's where you want to be. That's the sweet spot. That's the damage control range. That's where we want the schools to be, or even above that. You can see all the new schools are above that. So that's great. What's not great is the schools down below that range, and even more so down below this dashed line. That's the collapse prevention scoring criteria. So a building that doesn't meet the collapse prevention criteria means there's a risk that it could collapse in an earthquake event. So of course you can see there's a number of schools that are below the line there, and that is not great. This is our energy use intensity number. So this is meant to demonstrate which schools have the best opportunity for efficiency improvements. So, with 5.7 million square feet of building space, we use a lot of energy as a district, which Josh could probably speak to better than me, but these are the buildings that could really need to be upgraded. The efficiency of the building really isn't good, and it needs to be renovated. And in doing so, we could see a lot of energy savings. This slide, there's a lot going on here, but this this is a kind of a snapshot from the facilities condition assessment. I think we looked at this as a group previously, actually, but this shows the deferred maintenance at each school. So this is the way they calculate this. This is a huge spreadsheet, but really it's summing all of the different assets at each facility that are reaching end of life within each of these years. And then the estimated cost of doing that work. So just looking down, even just at the bottom of the chart here, you can see this is the annual amount necessary to repair these buildings. So it varies by the year, but it's quite a bit, especially initially. And this does include dealing with some of the seismic deficiencies too.
So if I could make a couple of comments about the facility condition assessment, Brad and David, we hired McKinstry, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with McKinstry, but we hired them to do our FCA, and believe, Dick, that we did it back in May. We gave a presentation of the FCA. I think that was a quick run through of that presentation. It was the same presentation we gave to the school board. And Brian, if it's something that is something that we can present again to the BAC, we're happy to do that to kind of get everybody kind of back up on that information. Some things that did change from the previous presentation, we were looking at, Aaron, if you can go back to the FCI rating. When we presented it to the school board, Nan, you may recall this, we looked at the value of replacement in year one over the total replacement value. And then in conversation with McKinstry and the state and our team, to be consistent with what's typically done, we took the total value for repair and divided it by the replacement value. So you still kind of had the same breakout, but it was just a difference in how those numbers were presented. I just wanted to kind of share some of that. Some things have changed since we last talked about it with the BAC. And if it's, again, if it's a conversation that we'd like to have again, we're happy to do that.
I think it'd be good. In fact, I think that it provides some of that context that Brad was looking for when we're making decisions and looking forward.
And then this slide also kind of speaks to equity a little bit, but in a different way. And this shows where over the course of the current bond, at what schools have we put in major investments. So it's easy to see where money was spent and not spent. Okay, and then sort of the third leg of the stool there I was talking about is our capacity and enrollment needs across the district. I think at a high level, it's worth mentioning that really we're in a situation where we're looking at declining enrollment over the next decade. So we work with someone who does projections, population projections through PSU. And they've put together the information for this analysis. And so these slides show enrollment projected out 10 years in the future. So this slide shows at elementary schools, and the number represents either the gain or decrease in projected enrollment at that facility. So you can see in some areas it's down quite a bit, and in some it's up quite a bit. So there are a number of ways to deal with this. You know, we could add classrooms, we could build a school, but I think what you can see by looking at this is the capacity or enrollment is overall down, and you really could deal with it through a boundary adjustment. This is showing the same thing at the middle school level. although this doesn't reflect the recent boundary change at the middle school level. So these numbers look a little bit better after the boundary adjustment gets factored in. And then this is the same situation at the high school level. So pretty staggering numbers, especially at the high school level. So that is that presentation. Does anybody have any questions on any of those?
Aaron, can you send us a copy of that presentation? I think it's
I would be happy to.
really interesting.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out too, I believe I included it in the email I sent out with the agenda, but Shelley's team produced a couple of very wonderful videos. One kind of showing what happened in the last bond, and then one showing sort of describing the process to help select projects for the new bond. Both really excellent, and I hope you all had a chance to look at those. And then along with that, there's a link to the survey that we're putting out there to the community, kind of asking them to help us prioritize projects for the next bond.
Not directly related to your presentation, but is there any update on the timing for the next bond development?
Yeah, so no, not really. What we're doing right now is we are our team's schedule for the planning team is we want to have the information to the superintendent and to the school board so that if they so choose, it would be ready in time for a November 2021 election.
So Dick, I can provide some more details. So we the long range facility plan and the bond, going forward with the bond proposal is kind of on the same path right now. So we're going to give a presentation to the school board next Monday and give them an update on where we stand with long range planning and considerations for the bond on what that would look like. What options are we looking at? How much would we look at for the next bond? With a long range facility plan, part of the process is getting community input. So we stood up a focus group committee, about 13 members, and we've had 2 meetings so far. We have a third one scheduled for March. And that focus group will give us input based on the options that we presented to them. Here's a consideration for, a $300 million bond. And if we were to look at something bigger, what does that do to, a tax rate increase, and get that input from them. Along with that, we're getting community input through PTOs, parent-teacher organizations. We're presenting that presentation that Aaron just gave, and we're talking about that and grabbing that kind of community input. So those kind of all things are working, and we'll get the board to look at the long-range plan, and then we'll make, ultimately come to a decision. Do we go out and pursue a bond, the next bond? And there are a lot of factors at play right now with the pandemic. What's the impact of potentially increasing tax rate? All those things have to get considered, before we move forward with that process to put a bond out for a measure.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I probably should have said this earlier, but just went to my CAP program managing those number and to have a bond starting 14 now in on a construction escalation, and which of the comps and the potential reinvestment to the school district is the test. So congratulations on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, David. Anything else?
Brian, I just want to do a quick recap on some things that we owe to the group. So I'll I'll give background on VOS and push out a document for that and share that out. We'll look at the FCA for a future presentation, Brian, and that can be a conversation that we have. And then we'll get the LRFP, the long range facility plan brief that we just presented, and we'll send that out. We'll do that all together with the VOS background and the long range plan through email.
Great, thank you. And for other committee members, if there are other things you would like to hear from staff about, please, let me know, let Aaron know, and we can make sure to get those on the agenda. If you have any burning questions, they're always happy to talk to us about whatever the committee's interested in.
Brian, I'd like to just quickly add that I did watch the videos. I thought they were really well done, incredibly informative, and man, those numbers just came out quickly. So you have to watch it a couple of times, I think, if you're really interested. But kudos, seriously, I think you did an excellent job with those, Shelley and team.
Phenomenal production, easy to, just
very clear.
Great work. Yeah, very clear.
Brad, did you have something you were going to say?
No, it was just an endorsement of the videos. The information was extremely on point, and it made a really complicated subject really easy to understand and really distilled the essence. So thank you.
I appreciate that. I'll pass it on to the team. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I think we can go ahead and wrap up the meeting a little bit early. Thank you for everyone. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you to the staff, and thanks to Anne and Eric for continuing to support this committee and its work.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.